Right now, 5% of the global oil supply is anchored in this incredibly tense maritime standoff.
Yeah, and at the exact same time, Meta is finalizing plans to consume the electricity equivalent of an entire European nation.
Right, while the American Midwest is just, rapidly flooding. So today, we are going to show you why these aren't just three separate news stories. I mean, they are one massive, completely interconnected system. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Today, we're unpacking a pretty comprehensive stack of sources from the daily Tech Reader's 4 p.m. news brief, dated August 11, 2026.
And it is a remarkable snapshot of the global economy right now,
Yeah.
because when you look closely at these seemingly isolated events, you realize they're entirely dependent on one another.
Complete.
Capital, energy, computing power, the physical weather, they are all locked in this really tight feedback loop.
Absolutely. But before we jump into those connections, I do need to make a quick but really important note on the sources today. We are going to be covering some highly charged geopolitical rhetoric, specifically between the U.S. and Iran.
Right.
And this includes statements from President Trump. So I want to be incredibly clear right up front. This deep dive will impartially report the facts exactly as they appear in the source material. We are not taking sides.
No, not at all.
We are not endorsing any political viewpoints. We are simply here to convey the policies, the actions, and, the stakes exactly as they're described in this news brief.
I think that's the best approach. Our goal here is just to understand the underlying mechanics of what's happening on the global stage.
Yeah.
Stripping away all the political noise to see how the gears are actually turning.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we really have to start with the most immediate friction point in the world right now, which is the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, the ultimate choke point.
Exactly. So Iran has completely closed the strait, and they laid out very specific demands for reopening it. Those include an end to American military operations in the region, the release of frozen Iranian assets, and a reduction of violence in Lebanon and Gaza.
Right.
And on the American side, President Trump outlined two very severe options. He stated that the U.S. could either allow Iran's economy to continue deteriorating through intense financial pressure, or strike the country with overwhelming force.
So the policy essentially preserves a diplomatic opening, but it makes military escalation a very explicit active alternative.
Yeah, exactly. And the mechanical impact of that closure on global trade, I mean, it is immediate and it's devastating.
Well, you have to look at the geography, right?
Yeah.
The Strait of Hormuz is a massive bottleneck. It's the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean.
Think of the global supply chain like this massive factory assembly line. When you put a barricade in the Strait of Hormuz, you aren't just pausing the conveyor belt.
No, you're wrecking the whole line.
Right, you're causing this catastrophic pileup. It's like the world's most critical arterial highway being entirely barricaded during rush hour. But instead of commuter traffic, it's 5% of the world's lifeblood oil just sitting in a parking lot.
And that forces every single downstream worker, from international airlines down to your local Amazon delivery fleets, to pay premium surge prices just to keep operations running.
The numbers in this brief are staggering. On Monday, only 6 vessels passed through the strait.
Wow.
Just 6. And that is compared to a normal pre-war day of like 130 to 140 vessels.
That's a massive drop. And you have to remember, those vessels aren't just sitting idle by choice. The mechanics of maritime shipping dictate that the moment a major conflict zone is declared, commercial insurance premiums absolutely skyrocket.
Right.
Or coverage just gets pulled entirely.
Right, the insurers won't touch it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A shipping company cannot legally or financially risk moving a massive crude carrier through those waters. So the ships anchor off the coast and they just burn through operating cash while waiting for resolution.
Which is brutal. And the Energy Information Administration, the EIA, they calculate that in July alone, 5.5 million barrels per day went offline due to this conflict and the related infrastructure attacks.
That is over 5% of total global consumption suddenly just vanishing from the market.
Which explains why the EIA has raised their price forecasts. They have Brent crude projected at $86.81 a barrel and West Texas Intermediate at $80.88. But the really alarming detail in the brief is the timeline.
Right, because this isn't a quick fix.
Not at all. The EIA does not expect a quick fix here. They are projecting that some of this production is going to be offline through the end of 2027.
What's fascinating here is that timeline. It's the crucial detail. We tend to view these geopolitical disruptions as temporary blips, like, oh, it's just a bad quarter for the markets.
Yeah.
But reestablishing maritime logistics, repairing damaged infrastructure, and negotiating the diplomatic trust required to lower those insurance premiums, that takes years.
Even if the immediate maritime conditions stabilized in September, which doesn't seem likely, the EIA estimates about 600,000 barrels a day will remain offline through late next year.
And the EIA actually reduced its 2026 global production forecast to about 100.8 million barrels a day. Meanwhile, global demand is still hovering up near 104 million.
So you're basically locking in a prolonged supply deficit.
Exactly. You are locking in elevated transportation and insurance costs for airlines, trucking, and retailers globally.
And the U.S. government is actively scrambling to adapt to this domestic fuel squeeze. The White House just extended the Jones Act waiver for 90 days.
Which is a big deal.
It is. For anyone unfamiliar with maritime law, the Jones Act is this century-old regulation requiring that goods shipped between two U.S. ports must be transported on American-built, American-flagged, and American-crewed ships.
Right. It's very protectionist.
Very. So by waiving it, the government is allowing foreign-flagged ships to handle domestic fuel deliveries. It's basically an emergency valve to keep energy flowing to domestic ports without waiting for scarce American vessels.
Though it's worth noting that every single foreign-flagged voyage still requires individual approval.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which adds layers of logistics, legal review, and compliance work. The ripple effect of all this friction is that operating costs across the board are rising. When fuel goes up, retail supply chains, manufacturing, basic transportation, it all becomes significantly more expensive.
And that dynamic is triggering the first major domino to fall in the financial markets. Wall Street is declining precisely because of these elevated energy prices. But the specific casualties are really fascinating.
It's the consumer tech giants, right?
Yes. It is the big consumer tech companies taking the hit. Amazon, Alphabet, SpaceX, they all saw their shares drop significantly. Amazon and Alphabet were down more than 2%, and SpaceX dropped over 5%.
Well, it comes down to profit margins and consumer behavior. When oil prices are high, everyday consumers have less discretionary income to spend on e-commerce, and logistics companies face higher delivery costs. Suddenly, those historically expensive valuations of consumer technology platforms, they look incredibly vulnerable to investors. Capital starts looking for safer, more tangible returns.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The capital isn't vanishing, it's just migrating. Wall Street is pulling money out of consumer tech and flooding it directly into hard physical infrastructure for artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking about mobilization on a scale that mimics a world war. NVIDIA is partnering with major financial institutions, specifically Apollo Global and Blackstone, to mobilize up to $500 billion for computing infrastructure.
$500 billion.
Yeah.
That is $500 billion shifting from software into concrete, steel, copper wiring, and power systems.
It's wild.
NVIDIA's initiative signals that AI is moving away from traditional venture capital tech funding, and it's moving into the realm of heavy-duty project finance. You don't fund a massive data center the way you fund an app startup.
No.
You fund it the way you fund a hydroelectric dam.
And to speed this frenzy up, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, has actually stepped in. The brief notes they've exempted certain data center bonds from securitization requirements.
Which is huge for speeding things up.
Yeah, basically, securitization is this highly regulated process of bundling debt into tradable financial assets. By waiving those requirements, the SEC is essentially cutting the red tape. They're allowing these companies to issue debt and raise cash much faster.
Right.
But I have to push back here. When I read about $500 billion being mobilized and bond investors demanding higher yields because of the sheer scale of the borrowing and the government bending its own financial safety rules to accelerate it, I mean, are we risking a massive $500 billion ghost town of servers?
That's a fair question.
Like, can financial engineering and massive debt really stay aligned with actual customer demand? Or is this the ultimate build it and they will come gamble?
To answer that, you really have to look at the physical reality of the models being built. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the demand isn't speculative anymore. It is structural. Look at the numbers from Meta in the source material.
Yeah, those are crazy.
They are planning to deploy 7 gigawatts of computing infrastructure this year, in 2026. Next year, they plan to double that to a massive 14 gigawatts. They're even spinning up production on a custom AI chip starting in September. 14 gigawatts is not a cloud concept. That is the baseline energy consumption of a small nation.
It's genuinely hard to conceptualize how much power that is for a single company.
Well, if you consider that a standard nuclear reactor produces about 1 gigawatt, Meta is essentially planning to draw the equivalent of 14 nuclear reactors just to run their artificial intelligence architecture.
Wow.
AI is no longer just, software in the cloud. It's heavy construction. Deploying 14 gigawatts requires unprecedented coordination with utility companies, local governments, grid planners. You need armies of electricians, high-voltage network engineers, specialized cooling technicians.
And Intel just raised $20 billion through a share sale purely to fund physical manufacturing investment. The footprint of this technology is just staggering.
The models driving that massive power draw are getting intensely complex, too. The brief mentions Alibaba has a model called QUIM 3.8 Max, which contains 2.4 trillion parameters.
Trillion, with a T.
Right. And to put that in perspective, parameters are essentially the synthetic synapses in an AI's brain. The more parameters you have, the more nuanced and capable the model is, but the more massive the power draw required to train and run it.
And the competition is vicious. DeepSeek is entering the market and aggressively undercutting Western models on inference prices.
Yeah, inference is the actual process of the AI generating an answer when a user types a prompt. DeepSeek has engineered a way to route those computational requests more efficiently.
Meaning it requires less raw hardware to produce an answer, allowing them to slash prices. And the capabilities of these models are advancing so rapidly that OpenAI is currently pausing portions of their Project Astra model just to evaluate if it possesses critical offensive cybersecurity capabilities.
That's a huge red flag for the industry.
Over 1,100 tech employees are actively calling for international efforts to manage these risks. We are talking about software that could potentially automate the generation of zero-day exploits. The economic gravity of all this is so strong that Singapore actually raised its entire economic growth forecast simply because their logistics and semiconductor sectors are benefiting from this global AI investment boom.
The entire global supply chain is basically reorienting itself to feed this AI infrastructure build-out.
But this brings us to the most massive, unavoidable contradiction in this entire stack of sources.
Global weather.
Yes. Wall Street is handing Silicon Valley $500 billion to build the heaviest, hottest, most power-hungry infrastructure in human history, precisely at the moment the physical planet they're building it on is breaking down. Look at what happened in July.
Yeah, the physical reality of 2026 is rapidly becoming the ultimate limiting factor for all this technological ambition.
The weather data in this brief is genuinely alarming. July 2026 was officially the hottest month recorded across the contiguous United States in 132 years of observations.
132 years.
The average temperature hit 76.9 degrees Fahrenheit, which, that might sound like a pleasant afternoon, but as a continent-wide average that includes midnight in the Rocky Mountains and dawn in the Pacific Northwest, it is catastrophic.
It really is.
It's 3.3 degrees above the 20th century average, beating the infamous historic 1936 Dust Bowl record by 0.8 degrees.
And the sources specifically highlight the danger of warm nights, which is a really crucial biological metric. When the ambient temperature doesn't drop significantly at night, the human body cannot physically recover from daytime heat stress. Your core temperature stays elevated, your heart rate doesn't drop, and you lose the ability to enter deep, restorative sleep. It places immense stress on the cardiovascular system and exponentially increases the health risks, especially for anyone without dependable, uninterrupted air conditioning.
And that extreme weather volatility is happening globally. England is currently experiencing severe extreme drought. Nearly 75% of the country is officially classified as being in a drought right now.
In England?
Right. Their reservoirs recorded the steepest July decline in 30 years. And only 14% of English rivers are at normal water levels right now. It's devastating agriculture, disrupting tourism, and triggering unprecedented wildfires in places like the New Forest National Park.
Which you don't normally associate with wildfires.
Not at all. Meanwhile, a powerful El Niño system is threatening California with severe winter floods and coastal erosion.
Add to that the Midwest and Ohio Valley, which are being ravaged by severe storms, frequent lightning strikes, and excessive rainfall creating flash floods. And those floods regularly threaten to take down local utility grids.
So, if you are trying to build a 14-gigawatt data center, This is where the physical world slams into the digital one. You literally cannot run evaporative cooling systems for a massive AI server farm if the local reservoirs are completely dried up.
No, you can't.
And you cannot power those servers if the regional electrical grid is being knocked offline by 75-mile-per-hour winds and severe thunderstorms.
This raises an important question about the absolute limits of human labor, too. We just discussed needing armies of electricians, concrete pourers, and construction crews to build this $500 billion infrastructure.
Right. Someone has to actually build it.
Exactly. The careers section of this brief points out that outdoor employers are currently having to completely rewrite their operational playbooks. They are constantly adjusting schedules to avoid peak sun, mandating hydration and core cooling breaks, and managing incredibly dangerous working conditions.
So the grand ambitions of tech and capital are completely at the mercy of atmospheric volatility and, the physical limits of the human beings who actually have to swing the hammers.
It is the ultimate reality check.
So what does this all mean for you? How does this macro-level collision of geopolitics, high finance, and atmospheric heating actually hit home? The brief is full of these micro-impacts that show exactly how these massive systems filter down into our everyday lives.
Yeah, you see the vulnerabilities showing up in our most basic foundational systems. Public health is a perfect example of this friction.
There is currently a multi-state cyclosporiasis outbreak linked to contaminated lettuce. It has hit at least 15 states and caused 2 deaths.
And cyclospora causes prolonged severe fatigue and dangerous dehydration.
Right. And investigators are having to manually trace incredibly complex, fractured agricultural supply chain records just to find the source of the infection.
At the exact same time, the U.S. is experiencing its highest annual measles total in decades, primarily spreading among unvaccinated individuals.
The contrast there is staggering. We have billions of dollars being mobilized to give artificial intelligence models offensive cybersecurity capabilities, while simultaneously our public health infrastructure is struggling to track basic agricultural supply chain contamination and fight off mid-20th century viral diseases.
It's wild, and the environment and these new algorithms, they're also fundamentally changing how we navigate the economy.
Yeah.
Severe storms and record-breaking heat are actively disrupting travel and outdoor events.
Oh, absolutely.
People are increasingly sheltering inside, which means indoor entertainment is experiencing a massive boom simply because the outdoors are becoming physically intolerable.
And while you are staying inside, retailers are in a state of absolute panic trying to reach you. They are desperately scrambling to adapt their product information so it gets picked up by AI assistants like ChatGPT and Gemini.
We are witnessing a massive shift in consumer discovery here. For decades, retailers optimized for search engines, putting keywords on a website so a search algorithm would list them.
Right, SEO.
Exactly. Now, AI assistants are becoming the new gatekeepers. Consumers aren't searching through a list of links anymore. They're asking an AI prompt to just tell them what to buy, where to eat, what to watch.
And retailers desperately want visibility inside those AI responses, but they're terrified of ceding total control over their direct customer relationships to, a handful of tech platforms.
They're trapped.
So the weather dictates whether you can safely go to an outdoor festival, and while you are sheltering inside, an AI algorithm that retailers are bending over backward to appease decides what products and restaurants are recommended to you. The physical world restricts your movement, and the digital world curates your options.
Which leads directly to the most crucial takeaway from the career section of today's sources. If you want to understand where the professional and economic advantage lies right now, it is in understanding these intersections. Well, the ultimate career advantage today is grasping the deep, unavoidable connections between capital deployment, raw computing power, energy grids, and physical logistics. You cannot just be a brilliant software engineer anymore. You have to understand the vulnerabilities of the local power grid.
Right.
You cannot just be a financial energy trader. You have to understand the geopolitical bottlenecks in the Middle East. The specialists are losing ground to the synthesizers.
Because it is all one massive, interconnected system. Well, we have covered an incredible amount of ground on this deep dive. We started with a tense military standoff in the Strait of Hormuz that is effectively holding 5% of the global oil supply hostage and sending maritime shipping costs through the roof.
Yeah.
We followed that economic pressure as Wall Street pivoted $500 billion away from consumer tech platforms and directly into heavy physical artificial intelligence infrastructure. And we watched that unprecedented technological ambition collide head-on with the physical reality of a planet recording its hottest temperatures in over a century, breaking down power grids and drying up vital reservoirs.
It leaves you with a lot to consider about the fundamental nature of global conflict moving forward.
What do you mean?
Well, if you look at the last 70 years of history, global choke points like the Strait of Hormuz have been entirely dictated by the flow of oil. Fossil fuels have been the ultimate geopolitical currency.
Yeah.
But when you look at the 14-gigawatt energy needs of tech companies building these massive models, and you look at the devastating droughts, drying up rivers and reservoirs in places like England, it forces a perspective shift.
A shift toward what?
Will the geopolitical standoffs of the 2030s be fought not over maritime shipping lanes for fossil fuels, but over sovereign access to the fresh water and raw electricity required to keep artificial intelligence alive?
Oh, wow. That is a fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying thought to end on. A transition from petrostates to electrostates.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. And to our listeners, keep connecting the dots, keep exploring the sources, and most importantly, keep questioning the world around you. We'll catch you next time.